You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? My voice was steady, measured. Not loud, not angry. Just enough weight to make her breath hitch for half a second before she covered it up with a smirk. Hannah sat across from me at the kitchen table, arms crossed, back straight. Her dark eyes flicked to the side, looking for an escape route. Tell. Always had been. Edward, I don't have time for whatever this is. She reached for the coffee mug beside her. Fingers wrapped tight around it like it was an anchor. If you're pissed off about something, just say it. I leaned forward, forearms resting on the table, letting the silence do the work. Let her feel the weight of it. People rush to fill silence when they're guilty. She took a sip, swallowed hard. I've got work. You weren't at work last night. Her grip tightened. Another tell. This was a woman who prided herself on being unreadable, but I'd studied people for a living. Lies weren't that different from battlefield maneuvers, predictable, clumsy under pressure. A slow exhale, then a shrug. Stayed late at the shop. Crashed at Julia's. Julia must be real understanding, considering she left town last week. Hannah blinked. She covered quickly, pushing the chair back and standing. Jesus, Edward, you tracking my every move now? That what this is? I told you, the shop's been. Shut up. She did. Not because she was scared, but because she knew. She knew I wouldn't open my mouth unless I had the facts lined up like a row of loaded magazines. I stood, pulling my phone from my pocket, tapping the screen. The image came up instantly, grainy surveillance footage from Ray, time-stamped and clear. Hannah stepping out of a shitty apartment complex on the other side of town. Same sweatshirt she was wearing now, but yesterday evening. The same time she'd told me she was at the shop. And then, the real kicker, George Carter following behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes, stretching like he had nowhere to be. He was younger than me, but not by much. Built lean, the kind of guy who survived on charm and luck. I hated his type on principle. Hannah's breath came in slower now. Calculating. She looked from the screen to me, then back again. A beat of silence. Then she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't embarrassed either. It was the kind of laugh that comes from someone who had already decided their own guilt didn't matter. So this is what we're doing now? She said, arms folding again. Catching each other in lies? You want me to go through your phone? See where you've been, who you've been meeting with? You won't find a damn thing. Sure. She let out another short breath, shaking her head. You always were careful, weren't you, Edward? Calculated. Like every damn thing in this house is just another operation. You should have been careful. I slid the phone back into my pocket, stepping closer. Close enough to watch the shift in her expression. That flicker of uncertainty she tried to mask. You think I didn't know? I knew 3 weeks ago. I've just been waiting to see how far you'd go with it. She tensed, but covered it with another scoff. And what, now you're gonna hit me with some big moral speech? Say I broke your heart? Please. I stepped back. No speeches. Just facts. Her fingers curled into her sweatshirt sleeves, gripping the fabric. For the first time since I'd spoken, she had no quick comeback. The kitchen clock ticked behind me, filling the space. I let it. She wasn't gonna talk her way out of this. Finally, she exhaled, shaking her head. You were never going to be enough for me, Edward. I nodded. Expected as much. You were never enough for me either. You just didn't know it yet. I grabbed my keys from the counter and walked out the door before she could answer. The air outside was cool, the kind of early morning chill that settled deep into your skin before the sun had a chance to burn it off. I didn't rush to the truck, didn't slam the door, just climbed in, started the engine, and pulled away like I had nowhere particular to be. But I did. Ray Roberts was waiting for me at the Rusted Nail, a dive bar on the edge of town that never quite looked open but never quite shut down either. The neon beer signs in the window buzzed, half burnt out, flickering like they were on their last leg. Inside, it smelled like old wood, cheap whiskey, and the kind of regret that seeps into the floorboards. Ray was already at a booth, nursing a black coffee that I knew had been sitting too long. His hands, scarred from a lifetime of bad decisions, curled around the mug as he watched me approach. Figured you'd show up, he said, pushing a manila folder across the table before I even sat down. I slid into the seat, flipping it open. Photos, screenshots, transcripts, everything I already knew, but now it was packaged neatly, airtight. How bad is it? I asked, though I already had a feeling. Ray huffed out a breath, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Depends on what you call bad. She's been meeting him for about 2 months, but only started staying over the last few weeks. I pulled bank records, too. She's been siphoning cash. Small amounts, but consistent. I clenched my jaw. Where's it going? Ray tapped a page. Cash withdrawals mostly, but some of it got dumped into a separate account. Name on it? George Carter. That was all I needed to hear. I shut the folder and leaned back, staring at the faded wood paneling on the wall. She's a real piece of work. Ray took a sip of coffee, grimaced, and set it down. You didn't marry her for her morals. Clearly. I tapped my fingers against the table, thinking. You run a background on him? Ray nodded, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out another folder, thinner than the first. Nothing impressive. Grew up in Nashville, floated around a couple states before landing here. Used to work construction, then got into tattooing about 10 years ago. Has a rap sheet, but nothing serious. DUI, a couple bar fights. 1 count of fraud that got dropped before trial. But the interesting part? This isn't his first time screwing around with another man's wife. I raised an eyebrow. 3 different affairs, all with married women, Ray continued. One of them ended in a restraining order when the husband got too close to rearranging his face. Guy's a parasite, Edward. He finds women looking for an escape, tells them what they want to hear, then drains them dry. So he's a leech. Pretty much. I exhaled through my nose, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. This wasn't just some random screw-up. Hannah had walked straight into the arms of a guy who made a habit out of screwing over men like me. Ray studied me for a second, then leaned in slightly. So what's the move? I met his eyes. We start closing doors. Ray smirked, the kind of look that said he already knew where this was going. Figured you'd say that. I stood, shoving the folder under my arm. Keep an eye on him. See where he moves, who he talks to. And I want to know how much more she's taken. You got it. I left him there and walked back out into the morning light. The town was waking up, people going about their day, unaware that someone's life was about to get a lot harder. Good. I climbed into the truck, rolled my shoulders, and picked up my phone. 1 call, quick and to the point. Samuel, I said as soon as he picked up. I need to move forward with the divorce. My lawyer didn't even sound surprised. Figured that was coming. And I want full financial leverage. No assets go to her, no payouts, nothing. If there's a way to make sure she walks away with less than she came in with, do it. Samuel chuckled, the sound dry and sharp. You always did like going scorched earth. I put the truck in drive. Only when it's deserved. I kept things quiet. No shouting matches, no accusations, no desperate last conversations. That wasn't my style. People like Hannah and George expected chaos. They expected tears, fights, maybe some pathetic attempt to win them back. That's why I gave them nothing. Instead, I let the walls close in. George's first problem came 3 days later. He showed up at his shop to find the landlord waiting with an eviction notice. Unpaid back rent, complaints from neighbors, and a lease violation for unauthorized renovations. His little empire of flash tattoos and cheap thrills was crumbling. Hannah's problem hit the same afternoon. She walked into our joint bank account and found the balance sitting at an even 0. I hadn't taken the money. I just made sure she couldn't, locking her out with a single call to Samuel. The private account she'd been siphoning into? Frozen under fraud review. I was in my truck when she called, her number lighting up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. You drained the account, she snapped, no pretense, no buildup. I kept my eyes on the road, voice level. Correction. I locked it. You drained it. This is bullshit, Edward. I smiled. So is adultery. A pause. I could hear her breathing, fast and tight, like she was trying to hold something back. I need money. Should have thought about that before you played house with George. She scoffed, and I could picture her pacing, one hand in her hair, mouth tight. You're really gonna make this ugly? It was ugly the second you made your choice. Her breathing steadied, settling into something controlled. That was the thing about Hannah, she always thought she could find an angle. I have rights. You can't just cut me off. You'll get whatever the court decides you deserve, I said, voice sharp. Which, given the circumstances, won't be much. She hesitated. I knew why. Because she'd read that contract when we got married. She knew I'd planned for worst-case scenarios. You want to punish me, she said finally. Fine. But don't act like you weren't checked out long before this. That almost made me laugh. Checked out? I'd been here, paying the bills, keeping the roof over our heads, dealing with every damn problem that came up while she drifted through life like it owed her something. But I didn't bother explaining that. She wasn't looking for an argument. She was looking for a weakness. She wasn't going to find one. I hung up. That night, I had Ray meet me in the back of a diner on the east side of town. A place where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but no one asked questions. Ray slid into the booth across from me, nodding at the waitress when she poured him a cup. "Been watching your boy," he said, pulling a cigarette from behind his ear. "George's been sweating." "Good." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Any movement?" "He's been trying to pull favors. Called a buddy in Nashville, probably looking for a loan. Had a meeting with his supplier yesterday. Looks like he's short on cash for ink and equipment. He knows the walls are closing in." Ray exhaled slowly, tapping his cigarette against the table. "He also had a little meeting with Hannah." I didn't react, just let him keep talking. "Met up at a bar on 5th, he continued. "Wasn't exactly a romantic reunion. He's nervous, she's pissed. My guess? He's starting to realize she's more trouble than she's worth." That didn't surprise me. George had no problem chasing married women, but he wasn't built for commitment. He liked being the escape, not the responsibility. And now that Hannah was losing her safety net, she was looking at him to step up. Ray smirked, shaking his head. "You really did a number on them, man." I took a sip of coffee. "Not done yet." Ray chuckled. "Didn't think so." We sat in silence for a while, the low hum of conversation around us blending with the sound of silverware clinking against plates. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker against the asphalt. "Gonna corner 'em soon?" Ray asked. I nodded. "Let them squirm a little longer. Then I'll make sure there's nowhere left to run." George tried to run. Not literally, he wasn't that stupid. But the moment things got tight, he started scrambling for a way out. He pawned some equipment, tried to talk his way into a loan, even called an old friend who used to run a shop in Kentucky. But no one wanted to back a man whose reputation was circling the drain. Hannah wasn't faring much better. She tried to act like she was holding steady, but I knew better. She was losing ground fast, and when a woman like her starts slipping, she grabs for whatever she can. I gave it another 2 days just to let the pressure build. Then I set the meeting. A quiet spot, private. One of the training facilities I used for my security firm, a plain, nondescript warehouse on the edge of town. Soundproof, locked down, no interruptions. They showed up because they didn't have a choice. George walked in first, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, eyes flicking around like he was already looking for an exit. Hannah followed close behind, arms crossed, mouth set in a hard line. I was waiting for them at the center of the room, leaning against a steel table, phone in hand. The second they stepped inside, I locked the door. George noticed. "What's this?" His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "Just a conversation," I said, setting my phone down. "You sit or you stand, but we're gonna finish this." Hannah's shoulders squared. "If this is some kind of intimidation, it's a reckoning." I met her gaze, let the silence settle. She didn't look away, but she shifted slightly, weight moving to one foot. A small thing, but I caught it. George sniffed, rolling his shoulders. "Look, man, I don't know what you think you're doing, but..." I held up a hand. "You don't talk unless I tell you to." He blinked, then laughed. "You serious?" I stepped forward, close enough that he had to tilt his head slightly to meet my eyes. "Try me." His jaw tightened. He wasn't small, but he wasn't a fighter either. He made a show of standing his ground, but I saw it, the slight shift backward, the way his fingers twitched like he was debating raising his hands. He didn't. I turned back to the table, tapping the screen of my phone. The surveillance footage played on the tablet beside it, clear and crisp. Hannah leaving George's place. George talking to his supplier. Bank transfers. The whole mess, laid out in front of them. "This is everything," I said. "Everything I need to make sure neither of you walks away from this clean." Hannah's nostrils flared, but she didn't speak. She knew better than to lie now. George ran a hand through his hair. "All right, man, what do you want?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "I already have what I want. You're just here to see it play out." Hannah's voice was tight. "You're ruining my life over this?" "No, you ruined your life. I'm just making sure you feel it." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "Your assets are frozen. Your name is on every fraudulent transfer you made, and my lawyer has enough to bury you in court. You'll walk away with nothing. No house, no savings, no safety net. And George," I turned to him, "you're done in this town. Landlords won't rent to you. Your suppliers won't sell to you. Your customers are already hearing stories." He swallowed hard. "This is bullshit. This is consequences." Silence stretched between us. Hannah's jaw clenched. George's eyes darted to the door again. I picked up my phone, tapped the screen once. "That's Samuel," I said. "Finalizing everything as we speak. You'll be getting the papers soon." Hannah's breath shuddered slightly, but she caught it before it broke. "And if I fight it?" I shrugged. "Fight all you want. But I'd be careful. You've still got one thing left, and that's your reputation. You drag this through court, you won't even have that." She didn't respond. I turned back to George. "You? I suggest you pack. Tonight." He squared his shoulders. "Or what?" I stepped forward again, lowering my voice. "Or you'll find out just how much worse things can get." Another silence. Then, without a word, George turned and walked out. Hannah stood there a second longer. Then, just before she followed, she looked at me. "You don't feel anything about this?" I met her eyes. "I feel like I just took out the trash." Then I unlocked the door and let her leave. George was gone by morning. Packed what little he had left and skipped town without so much as a goodbye. Word spread fast. His shop was already closed up, the windows dark, the landlord stripping the signage before noon. His name would be forgotten in a week, just another cautionary tale people muttered over beers. Hannah didn't leave, but she might as well have. She tried to act like she was holding steady, but the cracks were showing. The house felt different without her in it, quieter, cleaner, like it had shed something diseased. She was staying with a friend, or maybe she was bouncing between places. I didn't care enough to find out. Samuel had the papers drawn up and served before the week was out. A clean break, no assets for her, no alimony. Hannah was smart enough to know fighting it would only dig her hole deeper, so she signed. No scene, no final words. Just a signature on a dotted line. I expected her to reach out to throw out one last barb, but she didn't. Maybe she finally realized I wasn't the type to be guilt, or maybe she had her own pride left to salvage. Either way, I wasn't losing sleep over it. Ray met me at the range a few days later. He showed up in his usual half-wrinkled flannel, a cigarette tucked behind his ear, carrying 2 coffees that looked like motor oil. I was already in the shooting lane, loading a fresh mag into my pistol when he stepped up beside me. "So that's that?" he asked, watching as I lined up the shot. "That's that." I pulled the trigger, the shot cracking through the air. "Center mass." He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. Thought she might put up more of a fight. She knew better. I fired again. "You push a bad position, you just get wiped off the board faster." Ray smirked. Spoken like a man who's been playing this game a long time. I set the gun down, rolling my shoulders. "I have." He leaned against the divider, watching me. "So what now?" "Now?" I exhaled. "I move forward. That's simple. That's simple." He made a low sound in his throat, something between amusement and approval. "You know, most guys, this kind of thing wrecks, em." "I'm not most guys." "No, you're not." He tossed his empty cup into the trash. "Still, gotta admit, I thought you'd at least get a little sentimental about it." I looked at him. Sentiment doesn't change reality. He let that sit for a second before nodding. "Fair enough." The rest of the afternoon was spent how I liked it, on my own terms, handling my own business. No distractions, no dead weight. My security firm was moving into new contracts, and I had things to oversee. It was work that made sense, work that didn't come with lies and weak excuses. By the time the sun started dipping low, I was back at my place, standing on the porch with a beer in hand, watching the sky turn from burnt orange to deep navy. The house was quiet. Peaceful. The way I liked it. There was nothing left to mourn. No loss. Just a problem dealt with, a chapter closed. Hannah would be fine. Or she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. I took a slow sip, letting the night settle in. For the first time in a long time, everything was exactly as it should be. The weeks passed and life settled back into a rhythm. Not the same as before, but something better. Tighter. I ran my business, trained my men, took contracts that made sense. The distractions were gone. The weight had been cut loose. Hannah disappeared from my periphery. I didn't ask where she went and no one volunteered the information. She wasn't my problem anymore. A few times I heard whispers. She was couch hopping, trying to land steady work, talking about getting out of town. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Either way, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. One night, after locking up the office, I got a call from Samuel. I picked up on the second ring. "It's done," he said, no lead-in. "Court signed off on everything. Divorce is finalized." I didn't say anything for a second, just let the words settle. A year ago, I might have felt something. Now, just confirmation of what I already knew. "Good," I said. "She didn't fight it," he added. "Didn't even ask for a settlement. Smartest thing she's done in a while." Samuel chuckled, low and sharp. "Figured you'd want the official word. Enjoy the rest of your night." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket, then sat there in the truck for a minute, listening to the low hum of the engine. No anger, no regret, just clarity. A couple nights later, I ran into Lucas, the taxi driver, outside of a diner downtown. He was leaning against his cab, lighting a cigarette, his eyes cutting over to me as I approached. "Been a while," he said, exhaling a stream of smoke. "Figured you might have skipped town." I smirked. "You know better than that." He nodded, dragging on the cigarette. "Saw your ex the other day." I didn't react, just waited. "She was with some guy, some barfly type. Not your problem. Just thought you'd like to know." I met his eyes. "I wouldn't." That made him chuckle. "Yeah, didn't think so." We stood there a minute, the night quiet around us. Lucas had a way of reading people, a skill left over from his reporter days. I knew he was waiting to see if there was anything left in me about Hannah, if maybe I was just pretending to be over it. I wasn't. "You seem good," he said finally, flicking ash onto the pavement. "I am." He nodded, satisfied, then opened the cab door. "Well, if you ever want to grab a drink and trade war stories, you know where to find me." "Maybe." He laughed. "That's as close to a yes as I'll get. Take care, Edward." He pulled away, the red glow of his taillights disappearing down the street. I went home, cracked a beer, and sat out on the porch, stretching my legs out in front of me. The air was cool, the stars sharp against the dark. I thought about everything that had happened, about how things had played out. Hannah was gone. George was gone. I hadn't just survived it. I'd come out ahead. Stronger, smarter, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open. A few months later, I found myself in Nashville, sitting across from Samuel in a corner booth at a steakhouse with real cuts of meat and whiskey that didn't taste like regret. He'd insisted on meeting in person to celebrate the final nail in the coffin, but we both knew he just liked watching the aftermath of his work unfold. He cut into his ribeye, nodding approvingly at the marbling. "So, tell me, Edward, now that the dust has settled, how's it feel?" I took a slow sip of my drink. "Like a problem solved." Samuel chuckled. "That simple, huh?" "It always was." He wiped his mouth with the napkin, leaning back. "Ran into an old friend of Hannah's last week. Apparently she took off. Some say Texas, some say Florida. Sounds like she burned through all her yates." I nodded, unsurprised. Some people don't know when to quit. "Nope." He took another bite, chewed thoughtfully, then smirked. "And your buddy George?" I didn't answer right away, just let my drink settle. George Carter was a non-factor now. Last I heard, he was bouncing from one tattoo shop to another, drinking too much, running his mouth in the wrong circles. A man like that didn't last long without someone to prop him up. "He's exactly where he was always going to end up," I said. Samuel lifted his glass. "Well, here's to the predictable fall of predictable men." We drank. The conversation shifted, business talk mostly, plans for future investments. We wrapped up a little after midnight, parting ways outside the restaurant with a firm handshake and a nod. No drawn-out goodbyes, no unnecessary words. By the time I made it back to my place, the house was silent, just the way I liked it. I dropped my keys on the counter, cracked open a beer, and stood by the window, watching the dark stretch over the fields behind my property. No more noise. No more bullshit. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages, stopping on one from my son. Short, direct. Thanks for the help. We're good. I tapped a response. Anytime. There was nothing else that needed to be said. He had his life and I had mine, but the connection was there, solid and unspoken. Setting the phone down, I exhaled slow, letting the weight of everything settle in. I'd been tested. I'd taken the hit, absorbed the damage, and kept moving forward. Hannah thought she was escaping something when she ran to George. Thought she was breaking free. But she'd only shackled herself to a sinking ship. Me? I wasn't tied to anything. The past was done. The future was mine, and I'd never felt more in control.